This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be putting on our time-traveling boots and heading back to World War II.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're going to explore a truly fascinating story, how the war completely transformed Canada's economy.
Yeah, you're in for a surprise. It's incredible how just a few years of conflict could completely reshape a nation's economic landscape so drastically. We're talking about industries, global standing trade relationships, the whole shebang.
That's what we're here to uncover. We've got a stack of sources, academic papers, firsthand accounts, economic data that paint a really vivid picture of this transformation. And get this, one source even includes a lecture.
Oh, wow.
From a history professor who truly brings those wartime stories to life.
Fantastic. Yeah, fascinating. Pre-war Canada was largely agricultural. Picture rolling fields of wheat, not bustling factories.
Right.
But when war broke out, everything changed.
It's like the entire nation did a 180 overnight. Suddenly, Canada was this vital supplier for the Allies, especially Britain, who needed everything from food to lumber to, let's just say things would go boom.
Exactly. And just to give you a sense of the scale, exports to Britain alone reached a staggering $1.2 billion per year.
Wow.
Mostly on credit. It's hard to even fathom the sheer volume of goods just flowing across the Atlantic.
It really highlights just how much Canada stepped up to support the Allied war effort.
Yeah.
But beyond the numbers, this massive trade flow had a long-lasting impact. Our sources show that it kind of pulled Canada closer to the U.S. economically and, in a way, distanced it a bit from Britain.
It's a pivotal moment in Canadian history, really. You could argue that this wartime realignment kind of paved the way for the strong ties with the U.S. that we see today.
So picture this. Canada, this agricultural nation, transforms into a booming industrial powerhouse, sending, mountains of goods overseas.
Yeah.
But how did they actually organize all this production?
Well, that's where the government stepped in and took a really active role. They weren't just sitting back and observing. They were directly managing industries to try to maximize war production.
Okay, so maybe not bureaucrats in suits suddenly learning to weld tank armor.
Not quite.
Okay.
But the sources point to some truly incredible examples of industrial transformation.
Oh.
Think General Motors, a company known for cars, pumping out over 1 million military trucks.
Wow.
Or General Electric shifting gears from home appliances to manufacturing radar systems and those massive searchlights you see on warships. It was a truly nationwide mobilization effort.
And speaking of mobilization, one of our sources dives into the story of Clarence D. Howe.
Oh, yeah.
The man who spearheaded this massive industrial overhaul. Some even called him the Minister of Everything.
Yes, Clarence Howe. He was a force of nature. He was heading the newly formed Department of Munitions and Supply in 1940.
Wow.
And his leadership was absolutely crucial in transforming factories that once made, say, toasters into producers of wartime essentials. A real visionary.
It really shows you how decisive the government was, almost overnight, to turn the country into what some called an arsenal of democracy.
Yeah.
And they truly lived up to that title.
Absolutely. By 1942, Canada was churning out over 4,000 aircraft a year. Imagine that for a moment. 4,000.
Wow.
That's more than 10 planes taking to the sky every single day.
Our sources mention a place called Victory Aircraft in Ontario. Wasn't that where they built those iconic Lancaster bombers?
That's right.
Those massive 4-engine heavy bombers.
That's right. Victory Aircraft employed thousands of workers, showcasing just the incredible scale of Canadian manufacturing during the war.
Right.
And it wasn't just planes. Shipyards across the country were bustling, building hundreds of vessels, including those crucial corvettes that helped win the Battle of the Atlantic.
It's mind-boggling to think about the sheer scale of production.
Oh, yeah.
So besides ships and planes, what else was Canada contributing? Were there other key resources?
Oh, absolutely. Canada was a vital source of raw materials for the Allied war effort. Think about it. Almost every Allied plane flying overhead likely had Canadian aluminum in its construction.
Wow.
Considering they provided a whopping 40% of the Allies' supply. And then there's nickel, essential for strengthening steel. Canada supplied a staggering 75% of the Allies' needs.
Wow, those numbers are incredible.
Yeah.
It's like Canada was single-handedly keeping the Allied war machine running.
Well, not single-handedly, but their contribution was certainly crucial. And then there's the story of uranium.
Oh.
Canada played a significant, albeit secretive, role in supplying uranium for, well, let's just say a top-secret project with huge implications.
Yeah.
But that's a story for another deep dive, perhaps.
Okay, so we've got factories booming, production skyrocketing, resources flowing overseas.
Yeah.
But what about the people?
Yeah.
How did all this impact Canadian workers?
Right.
After all, they were the ones on the front lines of this economic transformation.
That's where things get really interesting. Alongside the economic shifts, you see profound social changes happening as well. It's a story of incredible resilience and adaptation, of people stepping up to meet the challenges of war in ways they never could have imagined.
Let's dive into that then.
Yeah.
One of the biggest changes was the influx of women into the workforce.
Oh, yeah. It's a story that really captures the spirit of the time. Imagine walking into a factory that was once almost exclusively male.
Right.
And now you see thousands of women operating machinery, welding, building planes, ships, doing jobs that were previously considered men's work.
It must have been a real culture shock. I mean, over 1 million women joined the workforce during the war years. It completely shattered like traditional gender roles and expectations.
Absolutely. And the sources we have really highlight how crucial these women were to the war effort.
Right.
Remember Victory Aircraft, the one building those Lancaster bombers?
Yeah.
They employed over 30,000 women. That's just one example. But the impact was nationwide.
It's incredible to think about the societal ripple effects of that. Did this influx of women into the workforce have a lasting impact beyond the war?
Without a doubt. It planted the seeds for greater gender equality in the post-war period. You know, after proving themselves so capable and essential, it's hard to imagine women simply going back to their pre-war roles.
Right.
The wartime experience really opened up new possibilities and opportunities for them.
Now, with so many people working, unemployment must have practically vanished.
You're absolutely right. Think about it. You go to a town square and it's practically deserted because everyone's at work.
Wow.
Unemployment rates plummeted from 11.4% in 1939 to under 1% just 5 years later in 1944.
Wow.
It's a truly remarkable turnaround.
Wow. From 1 in 10 people out of work to almost full employment.
Right.
I can only imagine the positive impact that had on household incomes and overall prosperity.
Exactly. Increased employment meant more families had a steady income. You know, they could put food on the table, clothes on their backs, and afford things they might not have been able to before.
Right.
Of course, wartime rationing and price controls were in place, but the economic engine was humming, and many Canadians felt a sense of economic security they hadn't experienced before.
It makes you wonder, did this increased worker participation lead to a rise in labor unions as well?
Yes, absolutely. Labor unions saw a surge in membership and influence during the war years.
Yeah.
As more and more workers sought, representation and a voice in the workplace. It's worth noting, though, that their ability to strike was restricted under wartime measures.
Yeah.
The focus was on national unity and keeping those vital production lines running.
So we've talked about the shift from agriculture to industry, the role of the government, the impact on workers, particularly women.
Right.
But let's zoom out a bit.
Yeah.
What was the overall effect of World War II on Canada's economy as a whole?
In a word, transformative. Canada's gross national product, or GNP, more than doubled during the war years.
Wow.
Soaring from $5.6 billion to a staggering $12.9 billion. That's a level of growth most countries could only dream of.
It's like the entire nation went into overdrive, from farmlands to factories.
Mm-hmm.
Was it all due to wartime production, or were there other factors at play?
Well, the expansion of manufacturing and resource extraction certainly played a huge role.
Right.
But it's important to remember the government's role as well.
Yeah.
Wartime agencies like the War Production Board were instrumental in coordinating resources, ensuring a steady flow of production, and managing the complexities of a wartime economy. It was a remarkable feat of organization and planning.
Our sources also mentioned something called victory bonds.
Oh, yeah.
What was their significance in all of this?
Victory bonds were a brilliant way to engage everyday Canadians in the war effort.
Okay.
Imagine this. You're a farmer in Saskatchewan or a shopkeeper in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And you want to contribute to the war effort. You might not be able to build a tank or fly a plane, but you can buy a victory bond. It was like lending money to the government to finance the war.
So it was a way for people to feel like they were directly supporting the troops and contributing to victory.
Yeah.
All while helping to finance the war effort.
Exactly. And it was incredibly successful. It provided the government with much-needed capital to finance production.
Right.
And importantly, helped curb inflation by taking money out of circulation. It was a win-win situation for everyone involved.
That's fascinating. It sounds like a very, very
Yeah.
clever and effective strategy.
Yeah.
So with all this economic activity, did everyone benefit equally from this wartime boom?
That's an important question. While Canada as a whole experienced impressive growth,
Right.
the reality is that the benefits weren't evenly distributed. Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia, the provinces where most of the manufacturing was concentrated, saw the lion's share of the gains.
So certain regions were left behind in this economic transformation.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
Provinces like Manitoba and Saskatchewan, which were still heavily reliant on agriculture, didn't experience the same level of wartime expansion.
Right.
This uneven growth actually contributed to regional tensions and economic disparities that persisted even after the war ended.
It makes sense that the areas with the most industrial activity would benefit most directly from the wartime production boom.
Yeah.
But it's a good reminder that economic transformation is rarely a tidy or perfectly equitable process.
Precisely. It's a complex story with nuances and complexities, as with most historical events.
Right.
But overall, Canada emerged from World War II with a booming economy, a more diverse and skilled workforce,
Yeah.
and a stronger industrial base.
Right.
But the big question is, did this wartime prosperity last?
That is the key question.
Yeah.
Did these changes have a lasting impact, or were they just a temporary wartime phenomenon?
Well, let's dive into that next.
All right, so we've seen how World War II catapulted Canada from this largely agricultural nation to a booming industrial powerhouse.
You're right.
But the million-dollar question is, was this just a fleeting wartime phenomenon?
Right.
Or did it have a lasting impact on Canada's trajectory?
That's what makes the story so compelling.
Yeah.
The short answer is the war set Canada on a completely new economic course.
Okay.
One that continues to shape its prosperity today.
So it wasn't just a temporary sugar rush.
Not at all. What's fascinating is that the war left Canada with valuable assets that fueled its post-war success. First, think about that skilled and diverse workforce we talked about.
Right.
Those millions of women who entered factories and shipyards during the war. They didn't just disappear afterward.
Right. They had gained valuable skills and experience that became part of the fabric of the Canadian economy.
Exactly. And second, there was now a robust industrial base.
Okay.
All those factories that had been retooled for war production. Well, many of them transitioned seamlessly to producing consumer goods for a booming post-war market.
So the wartime infrastructure laid the groundwork for continued economic growth even after the conflict ended.
Precisely. Canada had the factories, the skilled workers, and a growing consumer market hungry for new products. It was a recipe for success.
Right.
And third, Canada emerged from the war as a key player in international trade.
We talked earlier about how the war shifted Canada's trade relationships.
Yeah.
Kind of pulling it closer to the U.S.
Right.
Did that trend continue in the post-war period?
Absolutely. The U.S. became Canada's primary trading partner, and that relationship continues to be vital to both economies today.
Wow.
The war also solidified Canada's role as a reliable supplier of raw materials and manufactured goods on a global stage.
So in a nutshell, World War II propelled Canada from a largely agricultural nation to an industrial powerhouse, a major exporter, and a key player in the global economy.
It's a remarkable transformation, and it speaks volumes about the resilience and adaptability of the Canadian people. To think that just a few years of conflict could have such a profound and lasting impact on a nation's destiny.
It really makes you think, what events happening today might have similar long-lasting impacts on our future?
Yeah.
It's certainly food for thought.
Indeed. History often provides valuable lessons, especially when it comes to understanding the forces that shape economies and societies.
Right.
And the story of Canada's World War II transformation is a prime example of that.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Canada's World War II economic transformation.
Right.
It's been an incredible journey back in time.
It's been a pleasure exploring this pivotal chapter in Canadian history with you. It's a story of resilience, innovation, and the enduring power of the human spirit.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring one.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.